Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Whitney Moore, and I am a senior career counselor in the College of Science and Engineering Career Center at the U of M. And I'm excited to have you here today for our virtual workshop on interviewing as we help students get prepared for our CSE virtual career fair that's happening next Tuesday, February 9th. So I've got a few logistical pieces for our workshop today that I will go over in just a minute, but we do have a student moderator with us today, Abby, who I thought I'd let introduce herself quickly. So Abby, if you want to just say hi quick.
Yeah, hi, I'm Abby. I'm a second year in bioproducts engineering, just kind of like a sustainable branch in material science. And yeah, I've got some resources if you guys have questions, and then I'll be kind of putting stuff in the chat and kind of answering anything I can. So.
Great. Well, thanks, Abby. So a couple of logistical things, like I said. So your audio and video have been turned off, just so you know, but that doesn't mean that we don't want to hear from you and don't want to take your questions. So the best way for you to get your questions to us is probably to use that Q&A feature that you should see a button for on the bottom of your Zoom window. You can put things in the chat, but Q&A is a little bit easier for us to monitor. And Abby will be taking a look at those, and both of us will be trying to address those questions as they come up. So feel free to submit questions anytime throughout our workshop today. And then Abby, like she mentioned, will also be sharing a couple of links throughout the presentation. So as we get started here, one of the first links that she's going to share is our Interviewing for Industry guide. So a lot of the information and even more that I'm going to be going over today will be in that guide. So definitely take notes as you'd like, but also know that a lot of information is going to be in that guide, and will be easy to capture there. And I'll also note that this is a half-hour workshop today, but we do have an hour-long interviewing workshop that is on our website, on our career fair prep events page that Abby will be sharing a little bit later in the workshop. So if you'd like to see a longer presentation with even more information about interviewing, that's another good one to access. And then the link for the recording of this workshop will be up on that same page a little bit later in the week as well. So our agenda for today and kind of what we plan to talk about. So we're going to go over kind of the purpose of interviewing, some different types of interviews, preparing for interviews, especially virtual interviewing tips, go over a few different kinds of questions, and then talk about kind of that follow-up piece of after the interview, and then a few details about the career fair and some other events that we have coming up over the next week or so. So as we start to think about interviewing, I always find that a good place to start is by getting on the same page about what the purpose of an interview is. So we certainly have that candidate perspective of, as a candidate, what should you be kind of looking to get out of an interview? Because the interview isn't just for the employer or for the people who are interviewing you. So as a candidate, you want to be using that interview opportunity as an opportunity to continue to determine if the position you're interviewing for is a good fit, is one that you're interested in. It's an opportunity for you to demonstrate your verbal communication skills, and obviously to get another interview or to get a job offer as well. And then from that employer perspective, certainly there's kind of a couple of questions that they're kind of trying to address. So one, they're looking to see if you have the qualities and skills that they're looking for the position. So this doesn't just mean the technical skills and capabilities, but also a lot of transferable skills too, so they want to see how might you interact with a team. Well, that's, going to come up with that second question that's here. Will you be a good fit for their team? How are your communication skills? Kind of all of those other intangibles that are a lot easier for them to evaluate or get a better idea of. When they're interacting with you, over the phone or over video at this time, or eventually again in person. So just a few things to keep in mind there. So as we start to then think about interviewing, there's a few different types of interviews that I thought would be helpful to talk about. So right now, phone interviews and virtual interviews are certainly the most common ones that are taking place. So phone interviews are just what they sound like. They're typically kind of considered a screening interview, which I'll talk a little bit more about in a minute. And kind of the purpose is to determine whether the company wants to do an in-person or a virtual interview to make sure that you have, with a phone interview, making sure that you have a good phone connection, a quiet place to be in for your interview. And since the interviewer can't see you, it's even more important to make sure that you're speaking clearly, to, verbally communicate your interest in the position in the company. Virtual interviews, these are interviews that are conducted online and are, obviously really common right now. And we'll go over a few more tips for those in a couple of slides. A few others that I like to let you know about, even if they're not really happening right now, you may experience them in the future, would be on-campus interviews. So these are interviews that we actually help employers schedule and conduct on campus. And they can be really convenient when we're all there. So they, will either take place in our interview suites or sometimes over in the suites in TCF Bank Stadium. Group or board interviews. This is where several people may interview you at once. So you may have three people who work at a company interviewing you all at the same time. So regardless of who is asked a question when you're in this sort of interview, it's important to make sure that you're making eye contact with everyone that's interviewing you, engaging with everyone. You don't need to just address the response to your question to the person who has asked it. And, make sure to bring enough copies of your resume for each person. And then on-site interviews are interviews that would occur at the company. So at their actual building, their place. And a lot of times they may be a little bit longer, usually more of a final round interview. They may include a tour of the workspace, and you may actually have a few different interviews throughout that time, to meet a few different people who are kind of weighing in on the hiring decisions. So to go into a little bit more depth about, some of these different interview types, the screening interview or phone interview, like I said, this is one where, they're just trying to ensure that the candidate kind of meets the minimum qualifications. They, usually may go over your resume in a little bit more depth. So it's important for you to obviously be familiar with your own resume. And they can be over the phone, in person, or virtual, but it's usually kind of that first round of interview that you might have. And a lot of times they're going to take place with a recruiter. The second round then, or, a lot of times maybe the final interview, the goal is to determine, kind of that final fit. That, like I said, they may be typically longer, and you might meet with several different people. So you kind of know what type of interview you're doing. Now, how do you prepare? So there's a few different things to think about doing here. So one, this might sound funny, but I always say research yourself. So what this means to me is just to do some reflection about your past skills and experiences, and think about how they're a fit, or they really align with the position that you're interviewing for. So one thing that's really helpful to keep in mind to help you with this piece as you're applying for positions is actually to make sure that you save the position descriptions for positions that you apply for, because oftentimes those position descriptions get taken down off of online and you may not be able to access them at the time that you get an interview. So make sure you save those so that you can spend some time reflecting on what your strengths are, your weaknesses may be that would be relevant to that position. Knowing your resume kind of inside and out and being able to be specific and expand on the things that you've got on your resume in ways that are relevant to the position again. Reflecting on why you're interested, why you're excited about this opportunity, how it aligns with your goals or the things that you want to learn more about or spend more time doing. So those are just kind of a few key things to think about for yourself. Researching the organization then before the interview is obviously important. And this just means kind of learning the basics. So you don't need to be an expert, but you definitely want to be able to convey that you have some familiarity and basic understanding and knowledge of what the company does. So this may mean that you research them, look at their website, maybe look at some information on LinkedIn, kind of see what are the latest things that they've had going on. And then also, like I said, be able to convey why you're interested in the company. Practicing interview questions then is obviously also really helpful. So the more you prepare, the less nervous you typically will be. And I think practicing is actually most important, not necessarily for preparing responses to specific questions, because we often don't know, or we usually don't know specifically what questions they're going to ask you, but it's more to practice interviewing skills than it is, like I said, to prepare for specific interview questions. So you can do a practice interview with a career counselor anytime by scheduling an appointment. And then I'm also going to talk about an event called Practice Interview Days that we have coming up in about a week at the end of the workshop today. And that would be another really good opportunity to do a practice interview. And then a couple of the final things here, preparing questions for the interviewer or, for the employer. So having 2 to 4 questions prepared, based questions off of information that, you've already kind of found, but you'd like to learn more about, or things that you kind of haven't been able to find. And we've got some samples of what these questions may look like in the Interviewing for Industry guide that was shared in the chat. And then just kind of keeping in mind that questions you wouldn't want to ask about at this time before you have an offer. You don't want to ask about things like salary or benefits, saving those for when and if you get an offer. And then gather interview information is kind of the last thing to make sure you're doing it for the interview. So whoever you're coordinating with for that interview, make sure you kind of know what you can, know who you're meeting with, when and where to be there. If it's, not obviously if it's on Zoom or a virtual interview, making sure you got a link. If it's going to be a phone interview, making sure are they calling you? Are you calling them? And then having printed copies of your resume again, if it's in person, and making sure that you can arrive on time. So a few virtual interviewing tips then here, just to talk about this a little bit more, since they're so common right now. And I think they'll actually continue to be pretty common after things slow down with COVID, now that we're all so familiar with doing them, and they may help interviewing be more accessible for a variety of different candidates and employers alike. So a few things to keep in mind, obviously making sure you've got a secure internet connection, and that you kind of got all your technology in order. That the technology you're using will be able to access whatever platform you're using to do the virtual interview. Preparing your environment, so being cognizant of what's going to show up on the screen behind you. You can use a virtual background in a lot of platforms that are used for virtual interviewing, but if that's not going to be possible, again, kind of making sure that whatever in your background is a professional setting. And really what I mean by that is that it's kind of neutral or not super cluttered. That it's not basically something that's going to be distracting, and then also that your lighting is helpful. So I've conducted a few virtual interviews, and it can be really off-putting if the lighting isn't great and they're like backlit and I can't see the candidate's face. So making sure that you've got direct lighting on your face so that the interviewer can actually see you, and then still dress like you would for a normal interview. We still want to be showing up in that professional sense. And then also making sure that you're using, confident body language. It's nice with virtual interviews that you can be seen, but you still want to make sure that, you're sitting up straight, you're maintaining, eye contact with your webcam. And, because you're typically in your like home environment or an environment that you're really comfortable in, it may feel really easy to get slouchy, or be a little bit more comfortable in your environment. So again, just being cognizant of things like that. Do a practice run if that will be helpful, and then be prepared with whatever you're going to want to have. So making sure you've got some water with you, making sure you've got a pen and paper to take notes down, and kind of anything else that you may want to have with you during the interview. So how to research companies then as you are preparing. A lot of this info is in that interviewing guide as well, so I won't go over it in too much depth. There are a lot of websites and resources available to you. Definitely don't hesitate to talk to people. And informational interviews are kind of that idea of like getting coffee with someone. Those are things you can do at any time too. And also keeping in mind information that maybe you've gathered from talking to somebody at a career fair or some other sort of recruiting event that you maybe participated in. So those are all things that will help you with being more familiar with the organization that you're interviewing with. We already talked a little bit about clothing and attire when talking about the virtual interview and still wanting to make sure that you're dressing professionally for that interaction, but a few other things to keep in mind specific to clothing and attire. So wearing appropriate attire, can increase your confidence, capture the attention of the recruiters, because that first impression does matter. So, basically for anyone, suits, a jacket, a button-up shirt, or a nice, other nice blouse will be appropriate, a tie, simple accessories, make sure you're kind of well-groomed for the day. So no t-shirts, sweatshirts, things like that. But really making sure that you're also dressing in a way that's authentic to how you'd like to be viewed in the workplace. I think that's so important to keep in mind, that you feel like you are being able to be yourself. And if you aren't feeling like you can, that's important for you to take note, because maybe a sign that that's not a workplace or an environment that you would feel comfortable working in if you're not feeling comfortable interviewing with them. So just something to keep in mind. And we have some really great ideas for professional attire on our website or on our Pinterest page, the link that's listed here as well. So I definitely recommend referring to that if you could use a few ideas. We've even had students that have attended our drop-ins, and this is probably even easier now that we're virtual and you may be in your home environment, that have attended a drop-in wearing what they're thinking about wearing for the drop-in to get feedback. So if that would be helpful for you to feel more confident in what you're thinking about wearing, we are more than happy to take a look at what you're considering wearing and give you feedback on that. A couple of resources that I'll also just mention for professional attire assistance. I think it's really important to note that, one, for anyone, you also don't feel like you need to go out and spend tons of money on professional attire. A lot of the attire that I have that I would consider professional, I've purchased at Target, I've purchased at Kohl's, I've gotten a lot of it secondhand. I'm a big secondhand clothes shopper, so don't feel like you have to go out and spend a lot of money. But also, if this is something that you feel like you don't have funding for, one, I'd like to let you know about our partnership with Ready for Success. This is a local nonprofit that we partner with to help candidates be able to get access to some professional attire. So that is something that you would have to apply for, and the link is on this slide here. And then we also have partnered, the university has partnered with JCPenney for a suit up event that is going on right now, where they actually have a discount code that you can get for 30% off attire. So there are more details on that on Gold Pass or Gold Pass powered by Handshake, if you want to learn more about that as well. And I think that code is actually good through May 2nd. So it's good for quite a while. So what to expect then when that interview actually starts, right? So usually there's going to be some sort of introductory phase, some an icebreaker, a few hellos. Then there'll be kind of the body of the interview where they're going to ask you kind of the majority of the questions that they've got for you. and you'll be responding to those. And then usually a closing. So they may, that may be when they turn it over to you to ask the questions that you have, or provide you a little bit more information on what steps will look like moving forward. So that's usually kind of what the structure of an interview might look like. There's a lot of different types of questions that you could get asked over the course of the interview. So, obviously some traditional questions that you've probably heard about. Tell me about yourself. What are your strengths and weaknesses? Talk about goals. We have a great, I think it's on page 3 in that interviewing guide, kind of walks through good tips on what to talk about in a lot of those basic traditional questions. You may get questions about information that's on your resume. We're going to talk a little bit more about behavioral questions in a minute. And then you also may get asked technical or case interview questions, which oftentimes you'll have a heads up on the fact that you'll be getting asked those sorts of questions from the person that you're setting up the interview with. But technical questions are just what they sound like. And then case interview questions can be kind of some silly ones where they may ask you things like, how many jelly beans fit in a jumbo jet? And either way, these questions are really trying to help the interviewer get a better idea of how you approach problem solving. So it's important to keep in mind that the process is actually what's most important, not necessarily getting a right answer. So if you do, that's great. But more so, they want to be able to see that you can communicate the process that you're utilizing to solve a problem or approach a problem that you've been given. So those are things to keep in mind. This doesn't happen a lot, but I always like to give students a few pointers on handling illegal and inappropriate interview questions, because I don't want you to be put in a tough spot. Just keeping in mind that you do not need to answer questions related to your age, your gender, race, religion, marital or family status, sexual orientation, country of origin, citizenship, health status, disability, credit history, political affiliations. That was a lot of details, but it's important to note that you should not and be asked those questions and do not need to respond to those sorts of questions. Job requirements, should not be based on those pieces of information for sure. If you do need to address illegal questions, techniques that you can use to kind of gracefully avoid them are to keep your answers short, broad, and general. So if you're asked something like, where are you from? You could say, I've lived in a few different places, but I am legally eligible to work in the United States, for instance. So kind of trying to redirect the question to the interviewer. Ask if you, if somebody asked if you plan to have kids or something like that, you can even say something like, I've read this as a family-friendly place to work. I am mostly interested in learning more about the position. So kind of making sure you turn it back to that. And you could even ask the interviewer why the question is relevant to the position, if you have concern about it as well. So if none of the above, work and the interviewer is being persistent, it's obviously okay to say, I prefer not to answer that question, and try to keep your demeanor neutral and avoid seeming defensive. Obviously, you may feel pretty worked up if you get asked those sorts of questions, but it's obviously helpful for a variety of reasons to try and maintain composure. And then certainly feel free to reach out to the Career Center and let us know about any concerning incidents that have. We're happy to support you in addressing those. So behavioral questions, as I mentioned, are one of the other types of interview questions that you may get asked that I always like to give a little bit more information or context on. So again, we talk about these in the interviewing guide, but these are questions that really ask you to talk about a specific example of a time that something happened. So to prepare for these, it's nice to have a few kind of stories in mind, or a few examples of situations that you've been in mind, ones that you've learned from and maybe haven't been super successful, and then ones that have gone really well, because there's different aspects or details to share from all different types of questions that may be relevant to the questions that you'll get asked. So when responding to these behavioral questions, because they are kind of about telling a story, it's helpful to have a little bit of structure in mind. So we like to talk about using the STAR technique, which basically here stands for situation, task, action, and results. So just meaning that you would share a few details about the situation and provide some context, then describe kind of what happened, or describe the task and kind of what needed to be done, what were the challenges you were facing or the things you needed to accomplish. The action piece is where you'll probably spend the most of your time, sharing information about what you did, tools or skills that you utilized, and then wrapping it up. So maybe there was a specific result or a way you knew that you were successful, something that you learned or would do differently next time. So these are really good ones to kind of think of, kind of be prepared more for the technique of responding to these sorts of questions. So then after the interview, a few things just to wrap us up here. Sending a thank you note is definitely something that we'd recommend doing. It's perfectly acceptable to do that via email. So it's helpful as you're wrapping up an interview to ask how you can contact your interviewer or interviewers if you don't already have their contact information. You may in that thank you email mention something that will remind them of your interview or that you enjoyed about it. Say you're looking forward to hearing from them. And then for your own sake, do some evaluation and assessment of your performance for the interview, but also your continued interest in the position and the organization. So that's the details I've got about interviewing today. Before we close up, I just wanted to make sure that we address a little bit of information about the career fair here. So hopefully you know that it's coming up next week on Tuesday, February 9th. The event runs from 11 a.m. to 6 p.m. Via the Career Fair Plus app or website. So definitely making sure that you're aware of Career Fair Plus, that you've either got the app downloaded or you're utilizing it on the website. And sign up to meet with companies. So you do have to sign up for specific times to meet with them, meet with interviewers, or sorry, not interviewers, meet with recruiters or other people that are participating in the career fair ahead of time. And registration or sign up for that opened on Monday. So you are able to go in and do that. And there's still, I believe, over 2,000 time slots available for students across the employers that are participating. So there's more details on the career fair website, which Abby will be sharing in the chat, the Career Fair website, about downloading Career Fair Plus. We also have a few other things coming up here. So we do have drop-ins yet today, tomorrow, and for some extended hours on Monday. So today and tomorrow from 2 to 4 and Monday from 10 to 4, all Central Time. If you want to ask some quick questions. One of the other links that Abby's going to share, has shared, is our Career Fair Prep Programming webpage. And there's a link on that page to access our drop-ins. And then we do have one more workshop that I think I have on the next slide here for international student career fair preparation that's happening tomorrow later in the day. But then one other event that I did want to talk about, and I mentioned briefly earlier, was the virtual practice interview days that are happening next Thursday and Friday. So this is a great opportunity to do a practice interview with an employer volunteer. And you do have to sign up for a specific time slot to do that practice interview ahead of time, and that is done on Handshake. So the instructions for doing that are at the very bottom of the Career Fair Prep events webpage that was shared in the chat. Whew, so we made it to 12:45, got through all the information. I know I haven't addressed any questions yet, so let's hop over and see from Abby if we've had any questions come in. And if we haven't had any yet, feel free to either put them in the chat or the Q&A.
Yeah, we currently have not had any. So I guess if anyone has anything, then now would be the time to ask them.
Yeah, so we'll stick around for a minute or two here. See if you've got any questions that come in. Okay, I see that we've got one that came in here, so I'm gonna take a minute to read it. Oh, yeah. So somebody who, yeah. So if you signed up to do one of the practice interviews, when should you expect the kind of application to be approved and allow you to sign up? As soon as the staff, one of my colleagues is coordinating that event. So I would assume today or tomorrow she'll, that approval should come in. If you haven't got an email that says that it's been approved, you can go back in and check and see if the approval has come through. And I would say if by Monday you're not seeing that, feel free to email the Career Center email at CSE Career at umn.edu, and we can look into that. But I would think if you just signed up yesterday, that by sometime today or early tomorrow, that should be approved. Another question that came in was about, will a company test how well you know the company? I wouldn't say that they'll test how well you know the company. I don't think they're ever going to ask you to give them like a rundown of their entire product line or things like that. But I would say that you want to have a little bit of context about what the company does, kind of what sort of industry they're in, have an idea of who some of their competitors are. Not that their competitors are going to come up in an interview, but just to have that context for yourself. Most of the time, I don't think you're really going to feel like tested on the company, but I think there's a general expectation that you're going to have an idea of who they are and what they do. And you basically wouldn't want to walk into an interview and have to ask, so what do you do? You'd want to have kind of that basic information, but I wouldn't say you'd be like tested on it. All right, so it looks like there's only a couple more folks left here. I'm not seeing any other questions, but if you have others that come up, feel free to utilize our drop-ins today or tomorrow or Monday before the career fair to get those addressed. So if that's all, we will go ahead and wrap things up for today.